Okay. So hopefully what you guys can see today is, I know last week I mentioned I thought I'd do a figure. And as I was kind of rooting around through my images, I realized it'd been a while since I'd done an animal. And an animal is obviously a type of figure. So I'm going to do a cow. I'm going to do it in a square format, 24 by 24. So it's pretty good size. I'm going to crop in something like this, and I'm going to bring some of this shadow from the top, which you may or may not be able to see. I'm going to bring it down a little lower. So we're going to figure out where we want the cow's back. This is kind of a targeted composition, much the same as any portrait would be. So we're going to say we're going to put the cow about here, and his backside probably about here. It's a little bit of an angle, so we just kind of put it in there. Probably can go back further. Let's take it back about here. So his backside is going to be about here. Probably the underbelly is going to be about in here, and that will drop his head down. So I think I might take him back just a little bit further. So sometimes you do this where you don't spend a lot of time working your drawing out, and you just take a little turp, get rid of some of that stuff, so it doesn't kind of get in the way when you're trying to evaluate your sketch. So one of the things about these live painting sessions is if I make mistakes, you see the mistakes. So they're obviously not edited. But I think in many respects, I think that's really important. I've done many videos where they edit it down, and this, you see the whole shot. When I mess up, you see the mess up. When I get it right, I'll tell you I got it right. So just kind of, it's all shapes right now. It's all we're dealing with is shapes and proportions. Right about here is where his shoulder looks like it starts. Back leg is about here. At this point, I'm not dealing with any sort of anatomical concerns, just more or less proportion and shape. So this space is really important, this space. Looks like that's about right. That's my first guess, right? And the back leg is about here and down. I'm going to be teaching an animal painting class this semester, so I thought this was kind of appropriate. As in anything, once I start painting in shapes and get away from just lines, I'll be able to tell if I think this thing is appropriate, or better word would probably be correct. That looks to be about where the foot is. We're going to have a lot of space down here, so I'm going to deal. There's little yellow wildflowers, and there's a lot of interesting stuff going on really in that background. Well, a lot of interesting stuff going on in the background that I can play with. So I have the opportunity. Now, if I step back, it looks a little on the skinny side, huh? And I would probably see that even more so if I this by the way is an Italian cow. I mean, you can't tell. There's no red, white, and blue. I mean, red, white, and green on him. But he happened to be a cow that we ran across along with several others up in the Dolomites. I like the little bell around his neck. I noticed in the Alpine regions, whether it's Switzerland, Austria, or Italy, France also, a lot of the cows have these wonderful little bells. And that's what we're going to start with. All right. Now, first thing I'm going to do is lay a background in. So I'm going to take, I got a number 1.5 inch brush here, and I'm doing that for speed. So I took my sap green, my cad yellow hue, a little bit of the Naples, some white, just trying to get it the right value, and a lot of terp. It's gonna be real kind of runny. This looks kind of where, whoa, it's not too bad. It's a little bit on the bright side for right now. So I just touched a little bit of ochre into it. It just, all ochre does is it kind of mellows out that green a little bit. So it takes it just slightly that direction. So that's basically what we're gonna do. That's why I threw a lot of terp into it, so I could get this stuff up here quickly. Just kind of get that green in there so it looks relatively correct, and then we'll take it from there as we move along. I'll augment those greens here and there with oranges, with a lot of fun little colors that I'm beginning to see. There's some more ochre into it just for the heck of it. A little bit more ochre, and we'll move it down here. Several different directions. I guess that's something that some of you may take note of, is that I generally do not lay it all in. If I look at it one direction of a stroke is dominating, very often I will augment that, change that immediately to go another direction, whether it's a diagonal, a vertical, a horizontal, doesn't really matter. I don't like that stroke, obviously. I mean, it's real subtle things. These are things that I'm noticing as I paint. And so I'm trying to call those out to you rather than just kind of do it on autopilot, which is kind of how I paint. Yeah, and I think everybody really gets to the point where they kind of paint a little bit on, for lack of a better word, autopilot. In other words, what you're doing is you are pretty much using the knowledge and experience that you've had to paint and make your quick decisions. I want it to be kind of thin. So that's when you hear this scrubbing of the brush, that's what you're hearing. You're hearing that it's not going down thick. Part of it is scale. I just don't have time on a piece this large to do a lot of real thick paint in, a 90-minute session. And I might not want to. I might want it to be almost, for lack of a better word, kind of drippy, kind of soppy. Gee, is it? I just come up with a new one.
Drippy and soppy.
Soppy. I can't spell that for you, so don't expect. I just see a lot of. I threw a lot of raw sienna in case you're wondering, right there, just kind of so that green doesn't look flat. Flat backgrounds tend to look like just kind of wallpaper, like it's a piece of something on a wall, flat. So I always look to see how I can kind of. Now, obviously, if you're painting someone against a wall and wallpaper, then that's kind of what you want, maybe. But generally, when doing outdoor type work, which this is, see, I'm pressing so hard, I'm moving the canvas around. This is just the same green. I haven't mixed up anything new. I'm just using the same colors over and over, and just adding to it from my palette. So we've got pretty much kind of this covered. There's a lot more going on color-wise. I can see it. Let's see about that angle. Top of his head should be, oh, I got it in the right spot, providing that's in the right spot. I think I got his legs a little bit long, her legs, and I'm going to do a little bit of a shadow up the top. There's a shadow coming in, which I kind of like, and I'm just going to use a little bit of blue, brown, and ochre into the color that, whoa, geez, too much brown. Brown is asphalt. Let's see what this looks like. That's okay. It gives me something to start with. I want it down about in here. Be real abstract with it. I want to be kind of fun. These shapes. Light's coming from here, and we can see it on the front of the cow. We can see it on the neck and the back, and we can't see it on the haunches, which tells me it's coming from the front. So upon looking at the shadows, I can also say, well, look at the shadows. They're all kind of moving in that direction.
So Mitchell has a question here. Any dangers to avoid when working with a square format?
No, I think squares are one of the easier formats to work with personally. Just be careful you don't push something really important into the corner, but that isn't specifically with a square. That's pretty much with any format. So you don't want to shove anything specifically in the corner. If you're doing a more or less a portrait like this is, then you're probably going to be somewhat centered. We can hit some negatives in here later. But right now we've got a little bit of a shadow up there. That's good. I kind of like it. It works. Just by using different parts of the brush and pulling the paint back off. So, okay, we're going to leave that alone. There's a little bit above the cow's back. It tends to be a little bit more on the brown side. So I just threw a little bit of raw sienna into that same color. And we'll just kind of come in here. I like it. It kind of hovers, but I don't want it to hit. So I might want to show it here. It's just a ravine in the ground plane. It goes here, and then it's going to come out right about here. Okay, so we got a little bit of tone there. And I don't know if the color is right. Value is pretty good. Value is what I'm after right now. I want the value to feel correct. I don't care if the color is right on the money. I'm going to change that anyway. So let's not. And we'll take a little bit more green with that. And bring it right here. A little bit more green. Let's try that. That's better. A little bit more. Okay. Pulling little things. I'm moving them into different spots than they are. A little bit of a shadow from the cow right down. And I want to look at about the spacing from here to here. And it looks to me to be somewhat in here. Okay, let's just kind of leave that alone for right now. A little bit of activity. And that's more or less what I'm painting. I'm not painting detail. I'm not painting it. I'm painting the activity that I see. And I'm trying to treat it like activity. I'm not trying to treat it like a specific thing. If it comes out looking like a specific thing and it's the thing I want, wonderful. Okay, so we're going to leave that alone right now. We're going to add little color variations down in here. There's a little ochre going on. And I kind of want to keep an eye on the time. I'm about 15 minutes in. So I'm going to grab some ochre and a little bit of raw sienna. And right in here, I see a bank of warm. I really like that too. It looks like it comes from about here, works its way up. Go back in here. over. Gonna add just a touch of burnt sienna, so it goes just a little warmer. Not much. Different directional strokes. See little touches of reds, and that's the kind of, honestly, in that, those of you that like dealing with things that are more abstract, that can really have fun with a ground plane like this. Those of you that really fight more towards realism might have a little bit more of a problem with trying to create that ground plane. But now we've got, it's not a flat green anymore, which is really what I was after. I just didn't want that flat green kind of quality. So now let's worry about the cow a little bit, okay? I'm going to set down. That was a 1.5 inch, just a gesso brush, simple gesso brush. I'm going to go with our, let's see, let's go with the number 12 rosemary flat. And what I'm going to do is, let's figure out where I want the light. Okay, I don't always do this, but so I took a little bit of white and a little bit of Naples yellow. The reason I throw the Naples yellow in is he's being illuminated by sunlight. I keep saying he, it's probably a she, being illuminated by sunlight. So what I'm going to do is give myself an idea as to where that light's going to be. It's going to be about there. Okay. Now that I know that, that's good. I can pop it in here if I want to, right on the top of his head, which is right here, somewhere there. Okay. So I know how light and bright he's going to be. Now, the reason I did that is I want to be able to mix an appropriate value for the shadow. The appropriate value is probably not a lot darker than that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my white, I'm going to cool it off with a lot of blue, and then I'm going to add something to neutralize that blue. And I'll start with, say, raw sienna. I want to look at this just to see where it's at. I don't think I'm warm enough, truthfully, but let's see. I'm thinking, in case you're wondering. Every now and then, when I'm quiet, it actually means I'm thinking, making decisions. Generally, I would probably start a little darker. So I started just a little bit darker, maybe a little bit more blue in it, just a little bit. And I don't know if this is the right color or not. I basically want it to be the right value. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look and establish the shadows that I see. So we're going to start here. I'm going to move it up. I have to add a little oil or turp to it to loosen that paint up. It was pretty dry. Probably a little, I throw a little more warm into it. A little bit more warm. So I'm going to be able to see how this thing is starting to shape up. And I just step back just 2 paces for right now, just for a second. And it actually looks better than I thought it did. I wasn't sure up close, but when I stepped back for a second, it looked okay. Now, I'm still not convinced my drawing's right on. If I were to do a little bit more of a finished painting, I'm sure I would have spent probably another 15 to 20 minutes more on the drawing, correcting it, things of that nature. But when you do that, you also lose some of the spontaneity. And sometimes some of the beauty of painting that I find is in making mistakes and working your way out of those mistakes. And it creates an interesting kind of dialogue, so to speak, between the paint and the subject. Slightly darker down the neck. Now it dips quite a bit lower, dips down to about here, that neck, right about in there. So let's just kind of pop it in there and assume I'm right. You've never heard me say that, huh?
Say it again.
Assume you're right. Or no, excuse. Paint like you know what you're doing and assume you're wrong. But when you paint like you know what you're doing, you have to assume to a degree you're doing okay. So there's a little bit of a contradiction in that statement all by itself. Now, you notice I'm not neatly carving those edges. I don't want to. I want those edges to be kind of ethereal to a degree. I know I can crispen them up, but if I start looser, then I know I can go tighter. If I start tight, I have to really destroy what I've done to loosen it up. So I find it much nicer to start a little bit looser, a little bit more free form, so to speak. So that's what I'm doing now. Now, the only time I might not do that is if I was doing a portrait of someone. That's why I like to give you guys these, so to speak, guidelines, and then tell you when I do break them. And I'm sure you've all heard the line, rules are meant to be broken, which is pretty true. I don't say they're meant to be broken. I just say that it's part of what happens. Many an artist has really made a wonderful living and really developed their own look, their own unique style by literally, so to speak, breaking the so-called rules. I'm going from warm to cool. I threw a little bit of, I just happened to notice it got a little warmer down here. So I brought a little bit of a burnt sienna into it, and the back leg looks a little cooler. So I just went back and got rid of that, and added a little bit more blue. I'm looking for that and that angle right there. The angle, that's probably where his ankle is. So it's going to go more like this. So what I want to do is I want to look at that spacing, and it feels pretty good. And then the back leg, let's just mask those two legs together right now. And it changes direction. And then this back leg is right about here. And the opening, negative spaces. I had a teacher when I was at Art Center say to me, the most valuable thing he learned in art school was the concept of negative spaces. And I don't necessarily disagree. I mean, I think that's something that I never even heard the term until I had gone to art school. Negative spaces. The space between two forms. So proportion looks kind of okay. Maybe a little long. Maybe it's that he's not long. I just don't have his legs long enough. That could be part of it too. So I might bring that down a little bit. And lastly, bring that down. Okay, so go back to the shadow, which I've kind of destroyed. So I just kind of remix it. And I never worry about coming up with the exact same color. A little bit more. Shadow in the head tends to be a little bit darker, but we're going to start up. And I'm going to look right here. I'm looking at this shadow, and I'm going across and saying it lines up right about here. That's where that shadow should be. So right there. I think. That's the other thing I should constantly say. I think. Or as of now, that feels right. Will it feel right later? That is the question, and I cannot answer that. You know what I will be able to? Later. So we're standing back. I'm starting to get a feel for the overall look of the cow. I can see warms and I can see cools. I can see a little darker and maybe a little bit more raw sienna into it, but a little darker right about here. And right there. Maybe a little cooler right here. Now, when I wanted to go darker and I got it darker, I just didn't go cooler. There we go. A little darker down on the leg. And so we start, there's almost, and I really need to say it this way, there's almost form starting. All right. And I use the word almost because there really isn't form, but it's almost beginning to feel like there's form. Important thought there, important thought. All right, now let's go down to where the nose is. And the nose is right about in here. This actually could come down further. So the cow should slowly emerge from this. That goes with any animal. Again, I bring this point up. It's kind of important. Is that as I do these, I'm referring to it as if I'm painting on location. All right. If I'm painting on location, this is how I think. If I'm painting a refined studio painting, I might think a little differently. I might be able to say, no, I'll spend a little bit more time getting that drawing down because I know the time constraint of light changing or something else going on is not an occurrence that I have to deal with too much. So we got that going. Now, look at the back of the cow. It looks like it gets a little bit of warm light back there, just a little bit. It's not, I shouldn't even use the word light, but that's just same value almost. And it's just a little bit of raw sienna brought back into it. So we're manipulating that real, and I mean this to really emphasize this, really close values in here. And if I'm fortunate, because I'm not dealing with as many subjects, I may be able to go further on this than I might otherwise if it were a very involved, either a landscape or a figure painting, because those, the more involvement you have, the more things. I was actually looking at doing a barroom scene, and I realized that if I did, I could probably do it and make it look like a nice study. And that's about as far as I could go, because there were a couple of figures, there were probably 20 bottles, all kinds of stuff. So who knows, I might go for it one week and just see if I can pull something like that off. I don't think I can, truthfully. But I have no shame in making a fool of myself and falling short. It happens to everybody. So I think that's an important thing for a lot of people to understand. Let's start to get a patterning in on him so we can see if everything looks like it's shaping up. I can't really tell. It's got a beautiful pink right on the nose there, which I can kind of come in with a little white and a little bit of burnt sienna all by itself. Maybe a little yellow ochre. A little Naples yellow. And let's see what this looks like. A little bit of a pink nose. It actually could be a lot darker. Let's go a little bit more. There we go. Let's just leave that. It's too red right now, but I don't mind it. So I'm going to go with the near black. We're going to take whatever I've got on my brush. I cleaned it, wiped it off with a rag, but I'm picking up asphaltum, some medium, a little bit of oil, maybe a touch of blue. I don't want it to go too warm on me, but I don't want it on the blue side, but I do want it. All right. So let's see what this looks like. And I'm going to go right here first. We're going to go right there. And we're going to find it as it comes back about it here. Every stroke that I'm touching this wet paint, I'm picking up fresh paint. It's a little on the warm side. So what I did is I added a little bit more blue to that color. And I'm going to add a little terp. I have some oil in it already. And it's going to come down right about in here. So we're really overlapping that wet paint. And you can get some really wonderful effects. I think I went down too far there, but I'll fix that if that's the case. well, kind of like the mush that happened there. So I'm going to stand back just for a second. It looks pretty good. I mean, I can see some things that are wrong, but it looks okay. And you know, keep in mind, patterning doesn't have to be 100% the way it looks. You know, this could be a different cow with a different kind of spotting. So we're going to leave that very loose, just like that. At this point, we're going to start to find some of the other areas. Down by the legs is going to go a lot darker, a lot darker. So I've given myself an out. In other words, what I did is I didn't paint them in as dark as they will end up. And a little bit on the front of that leg, I can see a little. You have to decide, is that shadow or is that a patterning on the animal? Because very often it's really easy to mix the two up. Back leg, same color. Okay, we're starting to get some nice, rich darks. So let me look right here. Is that where I want it? Yeah, I think that's about where I want it. And there's another one that's going to come in right about here and work its way up and then work its way down. So hopefully you can begin to see something happening here. Ooh, I love those lyrics. Little Buffalo Springfield here.
I'm just thinking the same thing.
There's something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a cow over here with some grass. Anyway, I won't finish it because it could get really crude. I don't even know if I'm dark enough, if you want to know the truth. Okay, I want to get that at right about that level, right about there. Now, I've mixed a lot of that other color into it. So I went back and added more blue and more asphalt, and just so I get that a little darker, smack that in just a little bit darker. There we go. Okay, now there we start to get, let's see, let's check this out up here. Right about there. And on the back haunch. Which I kind of like that spot because it gives a little bit of form to this backside of him. Okay. Now, as I stand back, it looks okay. I mean, I don't feel bad about it. It's kind of funny. As opposed to, do I feel good about it? I don't feel bad about it. I think it's shaping up. Let's put it that way. Okay. I need to kind of start on that's a little bit more going on right here, right around where his ear is. Now, where does that line up? It lines up right here. So let's pop it in. There's a tag, and I'm not going to put the tag. On his ear, by the way. So when I say I'm not going to put the tag, I'm not going to put the tag on his ear.
Sure. That's for ear.
And it kind of gets a little dark, fuzzy over in here. So let's start to distinguish a little bit. I'm going to take that brush rather than mix lights with it, since I'm using this a lot for my darks. I'm going to set it down and I'm going to pick up a separate brush for the lights. Same size brush. All right. Now I'm going to look at this thing for a second and decide exactly how I want to handle this. I want this to be here, here, and I think I need to pick up a light, right? Not bright light, but this. I need to carve back right there. Whoops. That's what happens when you don't have any medium in it. It just mixes with the other paint. So I'm going to I put a lot of medium into it this time. It should see, but that's what happens. Now it sits right on top the way I want it to. See anything I want to do here? Nah. Or here, maybe bring a little down, a little bit in there. I like to paint both ways. Let me explain what I mean by that. This would be a positive on this, but once I put that in, I like to be able to come back with a negative every now and then, which is this tone, and carve back into it. In doing so, it makes it appear more like you've not just painted darks on lights. All right. It looks like you've really worked both ways, which you really have. So I'm going to take almost the same kind of dark here, and I went back to a darker brush. I'm going to put it in as it appears down on the belly. Okay, he's starting to have form. So this is not as dark as some of the other darks are, but he gets a little darker down here. Now, what I have to do is I have to look at that and think to myself, is that going darker, warmer, or cooler? And in this case, I really can't tell. It's so neutral. Maybe a little, somehow I got a little green in there. I didn't mean to. But let's try this. It's probably going to be a little off. It's not as, gosh, it's not as far off as I thought. You get a little structure in his face. So it's not just a big flat. And I'm seeing tonality, which you probably cannot see. It's so subtle. It's one of the things, even in teaching the landscape class, excuse me, the animal painting class, I'm trying to get the students to look into areas and not just see it as a big tone, big flat tone. Look into it. Begin to see do I see more in there? If I can see more in there, let's get all that in there before I go into any feeling of finish. Little structure on the eye. Do it with a little bit too large of a brush, and your paint strokes will feel better. So hopefully you guys can begin to see this guy come to life. I see a little more structure. So I'm just using the darker color that I already have in the brush. Okay, cows shaping up. But you know what happened is earlier when I put the shadow in, I probably put it in too low or too high because I've lengthened his legs. So the shadow really comes down more here and then goes across here. So we're gonna have to wipe that out. All right. I want to get now planes that are facing downward are they tend to feel generally slightly warmer than planes, and I'm talking about shadow planes, by the way. The shadow planes that face upward. As they face upward, the sky will begin to illuminate them. As the sky begins to illuminate them, they will take on a little bit more blue. So it's just something to kind of keep in the back of your head at all times. That if I'm going to paint areas, I see a little, as I'm talking, I just noticed a little bit of muscle structure going on right there. A little bit more here, soften that down. Okay, so we're getting, I stand back and I look at it and I say, okay, how's it working? It's working okay. What I do want to do is take the basic shadow color, which is this. I think I want to add a little bit more light right about there. Cut it into that. Okay. Now, with this brush that I was just using, I'm going to clean off even the shadow color. I'm going to take white and Naples. And I already have a spot down on my palette that I was using. Could probably use a lot more Naples. I'm going to try and make it a little bit more on the yellow side than that. And what we're going to do is we're going to start really, yeah, it is more yellow. I like that. Now it goes up. There's a shoulder right up in here. So where's that shoulder line up? It lines up right below this, right there. So let's hit that. And then let's bring it down this way. Pretty dry paint, you can see that. I've added a little bit of medium to it, but it's pretty dry. And I think I need to put a little bit more medium. I kind of like, to a degree, I kind of like there's a toothy quality to that, which feels very painty. So I'm trying not to make this edge what you might call knife edged, trying to keep it I want it to have a little bit of tactile quality. I need to bring that green in, but I can do that at any time. Clean brush. Okay. Don't want to overpick it. So next thing I want to do is I want to find out, and it's kind of important, where that shoulder is, where it comes down on the front side of the shoulder that catches light. It's right here. So if I look very carefully, this light area lines up almost with this knee. I kind of had it indicated in there pretty close. And then it comes down to there. All right. And you notice what I did is I made the stroke very bold, but I picked up on that brush at the right time. So I have to stand back because I have to begin to see, do I have, I'm dealing with anatomy, correct anatomy. And since most of us have studied human anatomy, we really haven't studied cow anatomy. So you really have to rely on your knowledge of human anatomy, relate it to the animal, whatever animal you're painting. The animals that might get a little bit more tricky with that regard would be birds. Needed to break some of that up before I painted the light. That's going to be a kind of a reddish color, which is really going to be pretty. And we get the white on his neck right here, right there. Where is it? Right there. That's going to change. So we're starting to get the right feel. Now this white is not white. It's got a lot of Naples in it. Okay, let's get him back on his haunches here. I can feel the paint getting kind of dry. So what do I do when that happens? I add medium. In this case, safflower oil. So if I stand back, right now, the values feel decent. Okay? That's very important because if they didn't, what I would really need to do is go in and work on that. So if I realize at this point that the values are decent, then what I can do is keep plowing ahead, knowing that I'm in pretty good shape value-wise. Color, maybe not as much, but value-wise, I'm in pretty good shape. And then there's ribs. That's what we're getting there. A little bit of the rib cage right there. And a little bit, we got the front of the shoulder, and we got this little piece of light happening right there, coming in and then coming right down. And then we correct some of those shapes. You block them in there with a lot of authority, you go back and refine. we're really not at a refined stage, so I don't really want to get too heavily into that, but I do want to get that. Now, where it goes, the light goes up right here on his tail. So if I stand back, once again, values feel pretty good. All right, haven't hit on the front of the fat. Don't want to even mess with it. Don't want to even worry about that right now. That finishes it off. So what I want to do is probably in about, maybe 20 minutes, start dealing with that. But I want to get, there's a horn on the cow, which is right about here. Little horn that sticks out. A little bit of an eye. Now we're very important. The eye's got a lot of red around it. A lot of, and kind of a dark. So what I want to do is I want to see where that eye sits. The eye sits about there. Okay, and I just put a dot there. Now I'm going to come back and indicate a little bit more, a little darker, not darken it. That feels like it's about right. But what I need to do before I go a lot further, I can see one thing I need to do right now that I didn't do. This leg has got to be completed. It's a little on the blue side. Back down here. Okay. Now that's a very loose cow right now. When I stand back, I feel that it is a cow. Which means I got the animal right. That's all that means. It doesn't mean much more than that. Bring that, and then I'm going to fix. Told you I was going to go over that. There we go. This is where you really cut loose. If you like playing with a palette knife, it's a beautiful place to play with. I'm going to kind of keep it a little thin and kind of underdone. That's conceptually what I want to tackle on that piece. So now I'm going to take a look at any of the green that is around the cow and see if I need to fix it, which I can see a couple spots right about in here, which actually is important because it helps define some of the cow's structure in his face. So because it goes down, the jowl goes down, and then very nice swoop up in here, a little bit lighter. So I've got a little bit of a lighter green mixed up right here. Now, okay, so let's take a little bit of a smaller brush. No, let's not. Let's stay with this. Heck with smaller brush, huh? Stay with this number. It's my other number 12 with the lighter colors on it, not with the darker colors, but with the lighter colors. I do want to hit a little divot in his body. So I didn't want it to feel like a hole. Okay. Now let's deal, as the spots go into light, they become very red. So what I'm doing, I'm taking raw sienna and I'm taking a little bit of burnt sienna. And I'm gonna, let's see here. That looks pretty good. Let's take a little bit more raw sienna. Let's try it here first. Step back, looks good. Okay. Right here. I'm gonna make nice marks. I teach a class that I kind of came up with, seems like 100 years ago, called Quick Studies. And what I try and always tell people is all paintings, I don't care style-wise, whatever your style of painting is, it's all about mark making. All about mark making. And when you do these quicker paintings, you really, because you can't sit and over manipulate the marks you put down, you really have to teach yourself how to make nice marks and relatively quickly. All right. So that's the only way to be able to keep your painting fresh or paint quickly, either one. It's not just about painting quickly. It's about learning how to keep your painting fresh. And that's what I keep telling people. The concept of that quick studies course that I do end up teaching is not about learning how to paint fast. It's about learning how to make nice marks. I'm going to make it a little bit more red. So I throw a little bit more of a burnt sienna into this color because I can see it get quite a bit redder as it comes down about here.
So Gail wants to know what you mean by nice marks.
What do I mean by nice marks? Marks, all right, this isn't going to help. I'm sorry, I wish it did. Marks that feel good. Marks that don't feel like you sat and took a little tiny brush and worked like crazy to get it to look okay.
Labor.
It looks like it just happened. It looks like that, for example, I used to say, it looks like the mark just fell off your brush. And that whole concept goes back to a line that I've used many times, is that you have to learn how to make your brush work, do the work. You're just the guide. All right. The brush is really making the whole thing come together. And I did, when I was in art school, I did start learning that. I didn't learn it really well, but I did start learning it about, when you first start painting, and I was mainly painting figures, my whole thing was to make it look real and blended because that's how I saw people. I didn't see people as made up of a bunch of marks. But I slowly learned, and I have to emphasize the word slowly, I slowly learned that if you can divorce yourself from the concept of blending and just learn how to put a paint stroke down and leave it and make the individual's eye do the blend, that your painting can be a lot more effective. And I really must emphasize that that is something I did not pick up until I was almost in my senior year of art school. I understood it, but every time I'd put a mark down, it felt like a mark. It didn't feel like a cheekbone, or it didn't feel like a forehead. So I think one of the things that helps is learning how to paint a little quicker, because it forced me to deal with marks and not blends. And secondly,
Yeah.
I don't know where I'm going with this.
I don't know either.
Secondly, I think I learned how to stand back and evaluate my painting from a painting point of view and not a blending point of view. I think that's where I was headed with that comment. Now he's a lot more reddish color.
Mitchell was saying that Sargent painted hands with very nice marks.
What was that?
Sargent painted hands with very nice marks.
Oh God, yeah. I think he's the best hand painter that's ever lived. Sargent. And I think in really studying what he did with hands, I really think he probably worked the heck out of them. And once he had that down, then he went back and simplified. I don't know if because it's pretty hard to get those marks correct right off the bat. Now, I think obviously it was a figurative genius. So I think in some respects, he probably got it pretty damn close the first try. But, reading, I've read excerpts from people that had studied with him that had been rewritten and people that observed him painting. And they said something the sergeant had said, which I completely understand this, that he could paint a week on a head without ever getting into the features. I believe that. I mean, I completely understand that. In other words, basically what he was doing is dealing with the form, getting all of the form. Because if you get the form right, the features fall right into place. If you just paint features, what you end up doing is you're drawing a head on a tone. You're not actually painting. So it's practice, practice, practice. Some people, and I'm sure Sargent was one of those people, that get it a lot faster than people like me, who painted and painted and painted and sit and cussed myself out several times, and eventually started to make it work. I would like to think that all artists go through that. I don't know. I mean, there's a young kid right now that blows me away, guy Kyle Moss. Some of you guys may know his work. Just incredible. This guy is young and, you know, paints right up there with the pros at a, you know, as an early 20-year-old. So at an earlier 20-year-old, of course, I wasn't painting. I was illustrating at that point. And even though I was painting my illustrations, it's a different way of thinking. Those of you that are illustrators or have been illustrators or will be illustrators know what I'm talking about. So looking at anatomy, I can see things I like that I've got in here and things that I don't like. It's basically working okay. I can see really beautiful little color transitions that I like right here, is when you're right before your you transition into the light. I can see an aura of warm happening here and there. And you can really have fun with that. Let's get the cowbell. Quote Will Ferrell, we need more cowbell. I need to cut it up a little bit here. Okay, now I got to shape it. I did a really bad job of laying it in, which I would like to say I did that intentionally. I didn't. I just had it in there. It didn't feel right, so I had to readjust it a little bit. And in readjusting it, got a little overworked. So what you want to do is you want to come in and clean it up and recarve that shape. So there's the bottom of it. Here's the side. And I kind of like the way the paint is kind of pushing itself around. And then the back side, meaning, okay. So that feels a little bit more like a cowbell. Probably could come up a little bit more here. Now, I have too much dark there, but I can see a little bit more dark. And I can come in here. Behind the ear gets a little darker right there. And there. This is where you kind of slow down and you, I forget who I heard use this term. I think it was John Howard Sandon used this term. I'm going to particularize. And he was referring to it when you do portraits. In other words, something that is unique. And in this case, I'm using it because I'm actually particularizing a little bit of structural nuances that I begin to see. Because I want that cow and it doesn't feel right. It feels like it's got to go back further. The drawing, it's not quite right. So I've got to pull it back here, cut it down here, and then bring it over. That feels better. That feels better. So let's continue with that same brush. Where are we at? We're about 30 minutes away. So that gives me hope. Let's front. Because I'm not sure about the silhouette that I've got going here. We'll see what. See, I have way too much light on him. And I need to kind of come back with the shadow and trim it down. And there's more. This is where I could really use a small brush, but you notice I'm not. I don't want to. I want to paint with this. It's a good size canvas. So I want to paint with I don't want to nitpick. If I do nitpick, it would be right at the very end. So I'm going lighter, and I'm going to add a little bit more Naples to this warm color because I can see on the ear, it gets a lot lighter right there, right above the eye. Feels pretty good. Now, I just noticed, I didn't catch it earlier, but I did now. Another little spot there. Now I see really carefully, you see, boy, if I were doing a rendering, I could spend a lot of time on this. But I'm not doing a rendering, but I see a little bit of the indication of almost like a rib cage. And I think it's just his hide. And any little things that you can add into it and that you begin to see, get them in there. It makes it more convincing. And we're trying to paint a convincing painting that feels, if I were just doing a simple study, I might just do a simple light and shadow. But this is a little bit more than a simple study, partly because of scale. And a study I might do in 30 minutes, something like this. So this is a little bit more involved. And I think that's an important thing to take note of. Be aware of your time frame. Be aware of what you're dealing with. It's starting to work. This looks like we could send a little bit of work back in here. I can see that we can trim that down. I also see we can get the tail going. Not quite as dark as some of those dark spots, but it's pretty dark. And it comes, it'll be kind of free with it. Where does it go? It goes right here. So it's going to swing from here down that way. Okay. Starting to work okay. I see things that need to be worked out. The cowbell still is not real pleased about it. Okay, so let's see if we can fix it. Fix what you don't like. That, believe it or not, helped a lot. Just cleaning that up a little bit, cleaning that. Okay, now at least it's beginning to feel like a bell. Now I do see, I'm going to go to a smaller brush now, little number 2, and I see little nuances that I'm going to start to get into because I just begin to see it now. I can see a little bit lighter in here. Not all, that's probably too light. So we just take that color and push it in. Push it into the color that's already there. And I see a little bit of edge light right there, which clarifies that leg. I could keep it like this, and it would probably work. But I want to be able to take these things into a little bit of a different state than just a large study. So I'm going to come in with that. little off on the value, a little too dark, but not bad. Stand back. I'm constantly stepping back. I know you can't see me, but at this stage, it's the only way I can tell if it's beginning to work well. Get rid of that. Okay. I'm going to go back on this leg. I'm going to darken it and make it a little bit warmer. Not enough. There we go. Now, down in here, it gets darker. I have two ways of going. I can lighten that background a lot, but I don't want to. I want to darken that edge. So let's darken that edge. And I can darken that and that. That begins to work a little bit better. Still, I see some little, I want to kind of explain when I say I see kind of what I'm talking about. What happens is my eye goes all over the painting. I don't dwell in any one spot. I literally go all over the painting. If all of a sudden something stands out, so what I try not to do is focus in on any one area. If I do focus in on that area, chances are I will probably overwork it. And so I will revisit it. I will go back at another time and take a look and see what I think. Let's start to get a little bit of activity on the ground, a little bit of information in on the cow, its tail, so I don't have to deal with it at the end.
Sure.
A little darker, a little warmer. Right. Bad. Too small of a brush. You probably should have used a bigger brush. So what you do is clean it up. Go back, clean brush, one simple stroke, and it doesn't look overworked. But he's got some light flickering down on that tail. So let's get that in. And it starts about here. Quite a bit in here. A little bit at the end. And we'll just leave it at that without going too much further. I just don't want to, I'm afraid I'm going to carry it too far and over fuss it. I can see that the warmth gets lighter. Oops. Up here. And then lightens or darkens as it goes down. The eye is looking okay, but I do need to kind of make it a little bit more refined. And this is where I probably would go in. I'm doing it a little early now, but I would probably go in with a little bit of a liner. I have here, I think I have a cleaner one on the other side. Now this one's kind of crummy. I hate it when I have a crummy liner. It's a little bit better, a little bit thicker, but it's not bad. I think the first thing I'm going to do is just glance up at my painting and notice something. I want to get a little bit of this light on that tail, and then I want to get a little bit of warmth as it transitions from the dark into the light. Okay. Let's see if I can fix the cow's eye, because I'm not thrilled with it. I don't think it's terrible. It's indicative. I don't want it to be rendered, but I think it needs to be drawn better. So I'm just chopping it away. And now I will go back and add a little bit of darkness that I begin to see right about there. And in here is a beautiful little light that happens. I want to get the shadow in first. This is where I'm talking about being really careful, because this is where you can really over mess things up by using a too small of a brush too soon. So I want to get it out of my hands quickly. I don't want to use it too long here. Okay, I do need to get that horn, that cow horn in. There's one here too, right? Below this. Okay, we'll get that in a second. This sits about here. And the other one is, I see it more in shadow, and it's about right straight across from it, right about there. Okay, I'm gonna go back to some of my larger brushes now. This is the number 12 that I was using with the lights, white and Naples. And I want to clean that area. Whoop, I totally got rid of it. Didn't want to get rid of it. Just wanted to clean it up a little bit. Same with this right here. Bring that up. Now we need to get a little bit of information on this ground. So I don't want to totally abandon it. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start up in here, hitting some negatives with the green, the yellow, some medium, and Naples, and a little ochre. And let's see what we got. It's a little brighter than I want, so throw a little bit more green into it, a little bit more ochre, and some medium, because I get the paint. I could feel how dry it was. That's better. So let's just kind of hit some. And that way, I haven't only painted one direction, meaning I haven't only painted the shadows on. Now I'm bringing some of the lights, and there's a little light that looks like I could bring it, filter it up here. I don't have to be 100% accurate, you guys, simply because I'm indicating shadows that could be happening from any kind of tree, any size of tree. So I just want, again, I want the marks to be nice. And feel, if nothing else, I don't want it to feel overworked. I'm really striving for that in this particular painting, is not for this whole thing to feel like I've labored the heck out of it. And I think I'll bring a little bit down just so we have a little. That feels pretty good. I think I can just, looking at this, I can add a little bit of dappled. I think it'll help. But without overpicking. Okay. Over here, pretty good. Maybe a little bit of dappling, kind of coming down. If I don't like it, I wipe it out. Okay. Let's take and make this a top plane now. Yeah, more yellow into the color I was just using, a little bit more white, definitely more medium, because we want it to be lighter. We want to hit this top plane right here. I'm going to take more green and more white now, so it isn't quite as yellow. Let's see what happens with that. Just like, I kind of like that better. A little bit more green. And there's a lot of worms down there. Grab a smaller brush, white, similar value, a little bit more burnt sienna into it. And we're going to allow little worms to happen along the edge. So it does, again, I don't want this to look like a flat tone that I just laid in. I want it to be understated, but I still want the color variation. Cows in front. Boom. And it works its way up here. And then down below it too. So we're gonna take a little bit more yellow, add it to that color, and we're gonna hit the plane below it. Boy, I see warms there too. So I'm gonna grab this little brush here and sneak some warm color. That's way too warm, but it might work for me. It might actually end up working by the time I come over it. So we're going to take, again, the light of this plane. If I had played my cards right, I really would have done a lot of this prior to getting into the cow. But you know, when you do these, you don't know how your time is going to lay out. So I approached it with the idea of that I was going to need time to get that cow in there and get him feeling complete. So I figured if I had to slough off on anything, let's slough off in the background. I just stood back and I thought to myself, looks okay. That's exactly what I thought to myself. Yeah, I could take it a little brighter here. See, some of that underpainting that we threw in there in the beginning, whether it's right or wrong, can really work for you. Some lightning. And I want that to extend over, work its way, kind of fade a little bit. Well, he's getting pronounced pretty good. I can see a lot of little warm flicks I can pull up in here. And I just got this handy little brush here that I can kind of go back and sneak colors in. Maybe a little more brown into that color. Let's try this. Not quite, huh? That's a bad choice. I want the background to be convincing but underdone. Hopefully that makes sense to you. It does to me. And I think as we move up into these areas, I'm going to do a little bit of an underpainting with some warms like I already have. I'm going to bring some other strokes going other ways. We'll see if we can get her to fit into the painting a little bit better. Get a little bit more of the overlapping with some of the stuff going on. Okay, so we got a little bit of that. I can see a little bit more. I'll keep my eye on the time now because I know we've got about 10 minutes. Okay, got some nice little yellow flowers. So I'm taking pure yellow down in a clean spot, taking a little bit of Naples and mixing some of that into it. And I think I'm going to keep my paint pretty dry now, if this will work. Maybe a little bit more white into it, but pretty yellow. I like it. And so what we want to do is kind of find, that's a little bright lighter than I want. Maybe throw some ochre to that. So it doesn't stand out quite as bright. I may have a little bit brighter than I wanted. Again, if I had played my cards right, I would have been a lot more of this prior to getting into the actual painting. A little bit more Naples into it. I mean, ochre, a little medium. I'm standing back every so often too, just to see how it's starting to feel. You know, it's okay. I do want to get a little overlapping. So I'm going to take that same color, mix it in with a little bit of green and a little bit of red and a lot of turp. So it's really, when I say a lot of turp, I want to be able to just barely let a stroke do things like that. Every time I do it, I have to watch out because what I'm doing is I'm picking up some of that paint or get some, whoa, now see, that's way too heavy handled. So when you do, you just kind of go back on it. You know what I found? I was doing something a couple days ago. I have this little, it's almost like a makeup brush. It's a watercolor squirrel. Sometimes if I use that, put a lot of turp into it, what happens is I get these frayed edges, and you can come back very often and just do a little bit of overlapping.
Did you get the same effect with a fan brush?
Yes, you can. I just didn't see my fan brush handy. I saw this one. Now let's grab that initial brush I was using with the yellows on it. And it stops right here, but I need some over here. It can't just stop right. And go back and put. And then if you want to, I can single out a strand or two if I so desire. So this is where you don't want to overpick. But you can single out. Too heavy. Sometimes this is where your knife works better. Let's see, that worked much better. Got to be careful. You don't want to space them. You know, you space them too much, just doesn't work. So, I mean, space them too evenly. And if you find you put too many in, you know what you do, don't you? Take them out, wipe them out. Some dark ones in, you can do that too. Some darker ones in here. Get looser. I want to say looser as I get further away. I like the scrape. That works pretty good. That's actually feels kind of like I want it to. And I see it and I get a lot more color. Don't always use cool colors, but I can get some intensity as I come forward here. So I took sap green and raw sienna, added it to the color I was just using, added a lot of turp. So it's starting to feel okay. I'm getting enough into this ground plane where it doesn't feel too vacant, which is really my biggest concern about this whole background, about dealing with, because I know a lot of people when they do this, they'll spend 90% of their time on strictly making the cow look good and then kind of think they're done. And it kind of will fall short simply because you haven't put enough thought and character into that background. So it's important that you get enough of that in there. Something bothers me right here. Just got a good glimpse of that. We're just about done. We got a couple more minutes. And a little bit of a light area in there. Standing back. Don't like that right there at all. Oh, I see a couple of things I could do. Number one, I can let a little take the knife because I need thin marks. And let's get a little overlapping here. There we go. Now we got enough where it feels. I think there's a. You want to make sure that he feels like he's in. That she feels like she's in the environment and she's not on it. She has to be part of it. And so it's really important that you work back and forth and get enough overlapping. I don't like that right there. Get enough overlapping that it tends to start to make sense. Get a little of them going up in here, not maybe as much. Just kind of pick where you want any sort of textural variation. And by textural variation, I mean combination of value and color. There's some. Might get looser as I work down in here, though. I think I overdid the yellows myself. It's okay, you can kind of come back over them. Because you got to remember, in landscape, particularly in ground planes like this, it's very layered. It's not that everything sits on top. So you kind of want to keep overlapping one tone and one texture over another until you create the believability of that specific environment. Okay, so you don't deal with just laying it in there and being satisfied with it. This is where sometimes if you look at it the next day, come back a day later, things like that, you will see things that you can really get working for you. So I'm going to pronounce that horn just a little bit more by adding some more green back in here. And in doing so, I can come back one more time. Make the horn stand out a little bit more. So basically it's like I feel whenever I finish these, a lot of times people really happy. No, it's fine. That's kind of how I feel. It's fine. I think it's got the potential, in my opinion, to be pretty nice, with a little bit more careful finesse. I guess it's probably the best word I can come up with, because that's really what it takes. Just a little bit of careful evaluation and punching of a few things that probably could really be really effective. A lot of it's in the ground because I feel like there's too much right here and I need a little bit more stuff variation, you know, going on down here. Maybe take that big brush and just kind of hit some textural strokes like that. But right now, we've got our cow, our Italian cow, or cow of the Dolomites. Let's call him that. And I'm going to be fortunate enough, along with a group of attendees, to be there painting in about 7-8 weeks. We're going to be there painting in this same location. And if this cow's there, I'll be pretty happy, and because I've already painted him. So I know how to paint this cow now. As you can see, I can keep going on this forever until I feel I've got it exactly the way I want it. But overall, it's pretty well done. I think you guys can probably see that what could still be done to this, which I think is important for everyone to understand, that this still has a lot more that could be taken care of with just some layering and a little bit more care here and there. But for overall, you know, a very quick lay-in, it's relatively effective. At some point, I just want it to be paint strokes. You know, I don't even care if it's stuff. I just want paint strokes. I want the stuff to be more around the cow. And it is, my evaluation when I just stood back is I have the head just maybe a little bit darker than I wish I had done it. And I could probably illuminate, like I can see a little bit of illumination coming right down. And not enough. We'll do this one last thing and call it quits. What do you say?
Mhm.
A little bit of illumination right down here. It's not illumination by light, it's ambient light, just to give a little bit more structure to this guy's face.
Perfect.
Perfect. Anna says perfect, so that means I'm done.
Nice.
I want you guys to have a nice weekend. Next week we're gonna actually post I think I've already recorded.
Holiday weekend.
Yeah, it's a holiday weekend, so on Friday we'll be posting and
I think.
is it following? I don't even know. In any event, happy painting. See you soon.
Thanks, everyone.